Hey everyone, it's Joe Glines, and today I'm doing this interview with HellBent. HellBent, why don't you go ahead and give everyone a review of who you are and your background?
Like Joe said, my name is HellBent, and I have a channel called CiveReborn, where I mainly focus on doing very introductory tutorials on AutoHotkey. I'm not a programmer, never will claim to be a programmer. I'm not a very good coder. I write hack code, so if I want to do something, I just figure out a way to do it, and if it works, then I'm happy with it. That's pretty much it.
Well, and I'd say the other things is because this is how we got to know each other too. Was I was following your channel and learning a ton about GUIs, right, which you've done a lot on, and then you do a lot of stuff with games too. So people are interested.
Yeah, one of the main focuses that I do is on graphical user interfaces because I've always been interested in them, and because I don't work on a computer for a living. I don't have a lot of reasons that I need to use AutoHotkey. So in order for me to keep being able to do tutorials on things, I need to keep learning how to do things. So I have to invent. Basically, I have to invent reasons to use AutoHotkey, and graphical user interfaces are an interesting way for me to do that.
Um, Incidentally, a little off topic, but just to your point there. So when I interviewed you as one of my AutoHotkey user expert interviews, um, I'm kind of wrapping them up unless anyone here wants me to interview them. But one of the common threads, I heard several common threads from them. One was the vast majority of people, they're not coders, right? They're not programmers. They don't do it for a living. But there was that whole thing of like they needed to have a need, right, to learn the stuff. And several people mentioned, which I loved, it was they would go to the forum and just start answering forum questions because even though they didn't have the need, they would help other people, and that forced them to learn AutoHotkey better and learn other things that they wouldn't have normally have learned and expanded
Yeah,
their
I
knowledge.
agree. I try to get onto the forum every now and then. I'm not very. I think I have like maybe 200 posts total, so I'm not incredibly active there, but I do every now and then if I'm bored, try to go over, answer some questions, read up on some things.
Yeah, and I know we were talking earlier too. Is people will write you too and say, "Hey, I'm trying to do this," and anyway, it's a good way to expand your horizons of what you're doing, right? What you're working on. Um, so anyway, so today we were doing a joint video, and we were going to talk about two main things. There's arrays, and then associative arrays, or you can think of them as an object, but in particular, we're talking about key value pair objects, and just some of the fun ways, some fun things you can do with them, and how easy in a lot of ways once you
And
get the
how
hang of them.
frustrating it can be.
Absolutely, yeah, that's funny. I say easy, but you're right. When you first start using them, it can be very confusing, and
Sometimes
then
the simplest things are very frustrating.
yeah, and then but you get the hang of it, and then so it's one of those things. Also, when you talk to people, like I can't remember. I know you do stuff in C++. Is that right, or C sharp? I forget.
C. I used to
C.
do in
Okay.
C, but this is
Um,
over a decade ago.
yeah. Well, I for a while was learning Python, and the thing I gotta say I loved about Python was there's like one way to do whatever it is you want to do, right? Like
Mm.
for a loop or whatever. They don't have multiple ways, and that's one of the things. It's kind of a plus and a minus to me in AutoHotkey. We were talking about this earlier.
Yeah, I think we were talking about this when we did the interview.
Yeah, you
That
can.
sometimes there's a little bit of difficulty because there is so many different ways that you can do the exact same thing.
I think is it this way you can create an array also. Yeah, so I can see that.
I've never done that, but I think I've seen that in the
Yeah.
documentation.
So I don't use it just because it's just added stuff to me and I get confused on it. But that is another way you can create an array.
There was also where you have the ARR colon equals OBJ, and that
Well,
one I've never used, and I don't know what's going on with that one either.
I believe that is for the actually it's not the that might be the associative array, right?
Yeah.
Let's see if the
So
um
okay, so I don't have the full understanding. I have a very low
yeah
level or very bad understanding of it. Is in the arrays that we're going to be doing, they're all in from what I see, it looks like everything isn't there's below the surface everything is an object because we can do methods on it. We can get the length of an array. We can
yeah
call these different functions on it to do certain things with them. Like we can remove certain things and do
yep
this. So I
yep
think of like for me it's the I prefer in my lingo, the array is just the indexed whenever I'm using just the index, and the associative array, I'll never call it an associative array. I'll always call it an object. So if anyone ever hears me say object or whatever,
Yeah.
that's what I mean. I just mean an associative array.
Yeah. Another one.
So what? Okay. So what is the difference between the two of them?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say the other one though is a dictionary is also an associative array, which is also an object. So the thing that you know why I call it the second one an associative array over an object is because it helps me remind you it's a key value pair, right? It's an there's association between these things in the object. And
I think for me it's a lot to do with what I use them for, and that's a lot of the time it's keeping track of the position of things. So I think of when I've looked up things on coding out games and things like that, on moving things, I'm moving an object. So I associate it like that. That's why I don't use the associative array word. I use the object array. I use rather it's an object, not an associative array.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just my language that I use for it. And that's just how I learned how to say it. So.
Oh yeah, yeah. And again, I'm sure we're confusing everybody, right?
Yeah.
But that's because it is confusing, right? And our goal though is to simplify it and say, look, it really doesn't matter what you call it, right? And I think to your point, HellBent, think of them really as an object. And to me, what I think of them, even when it's an array, I still think of it as a key value pair. It's just that the key is not stated, right? It's not actually, you don't write it, but it's automatically assigned, right?
For its index, for whatever position it has.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what I was just going to demonstrate here. Let me save this and run it. And so here's the 1 is the key and the 10 is the value in our key value pair. We're looping over array. So there's 1 and then it's 2 and 20 and 3.
So this is, you're talking about, you have right now ARR : equals, and then in brackets you have 10, 20, 30, 40,
yep,
and so on. So now you for looped through that array.
Right.
And you're saying that for every key.
Right. So let's do this. Let's do it instead of for every. I think you can do it with just the value, right? Or is it just the key?
I don't know. I don't use. I'm still used to.
No. So that's what it is. It and of course the letters are indifferent, right? Let's write key here just to keep it consistent. You don't have to do for every key value in array, or in an object. You can just do for every key, but you can't do for every value. You have to when you want
because
value.
You have to have that. What about if you add a comma?
I think it errors if you just put, oops, holy cow, there we go. Oh, apparently it doesn't error.
No. I mean, like if you don't want to use if you want to use the value. See, right now you're using the key because it's the first thing that it's expecting.
Oh.
So it's for key. So what if you put 2 commas? Because you can use AutoHotkey is very flexible with the commas. Like sometimes you don't have to always use them with everything, and it gets kind of confusing.
Yeah, it's not letting me load it like that.
Okay, yeah.
So no matter what we did, it didn't allow for jumping to the value straight away without putting in key here. So let's go back and put in value. And let's put, just so we can see it a little prettier, key. And then value. Oops. Space there. There we go. Oh, I need a space before it. There we go. So there's the key is 1, the value is 10, key is 2, value is 20. Right now we're looping over it. Also, just if you're really new to AutoHotkey, when it's only 2 lines, you don't need the braces to tell it this is all one section. If it was more than 2 lines, we would need the brackets to go around it, and then I could put other stuff in here, and it would stay within. I can do another thing in here, and it would stay within this loop, the for loop.
Yeah. So for example, if you wanted to add a variable together or whatever inside, if you want it to be that to happen, let's take I plus plus. If you created you need to create it before the array though, or the for loop.
I don't think you do.
I've seen sometimes these kind of things.
I agree. But it differs. Yeah, let's take a look, right? I'm going to use this message box here just to simplify. So there's 1, So we
Okay,
didn't.
so as soon as it gave the first value, you know that it worked. But if you want to include it in the loop, if you had removed the brackets, then it's going to be outside of the loop.
That's right. Yeah, and let's demonstrate that just so they get it, because it's one of those things when you first start learning AutoHotkey, and you don't know that.
It applies to, at least as far as I know, a lot of languages, the same kind of thing where you can
So,
have one line.
oops. Well, since I'm doing that, there we go. So now here's the key value. Actually, it's going to do all the key value pairs first because it's looping within that, right? 6, and then we get the 1, which is line 11, because line 10 doesn't have a message box, and then we get the 12, right? That's why it didn't come up each time within
So
that.
the first message box had like six different times that it popped up,
Right.
but because the I++ was outside of that loop, it
Right.
only added once.
Right. And then we throw it back in there, and let's bring in both of these. And now we'll see there's 2. So there's that one, and then the 1, and then that one, and then the 2, and then that one, and then the 3. So that one 4, might as well finish it. 5.
So if it's not clear to anyone, if anyone's not clear, that M with the parentheses and the I in it, that's just a function that he has written on his computer somewhere that he can use whenever he wants. So,
yeah, it's a message box function. The thing which actually you might have just seen, let me demonstrate the benefits of it is actually, no, let me just bring it right up to the top here. I'll copy it now to get rid of it. So it's really cool because it's a message box function, but it looks at what gets passed to it. If it gets past an object, it will break it out on every one. And so this is the first, second, third, fourth,
even without looping it.
Well, it's
so
doing
in the function itself.
Yeah,
it's got a loop. Yeah.
If it's not if it's not an object, it'll automatically. I could do this. I could pass it hello, and then I can put in a comma, Joe. Now when I run it, it puts those on separate lines. Right. So I can pass as many parameters. It's a variadic function. I can pass as many parameters to it as I want to. I could also throw in that array here, and it actually does both. Right. It's really flexible. We actually just documented it the other day in a video, and I posted to it. But yeah, anyway, it's pretty cool. So there's
actually a lot of commands within AutoHotkey that it's a lot more convenient to put them into an array. I mean, into a function. An example that I use quite commonly is getting random values.
Yeah.
Because you can't use expressions in the command, the random command in AutoHotkey. It makes it a pain in the butt because you have to create some temporary variables and everything like that. But if you create a function that does the exact same thing, you can pass the arguments as an expression.
Yeah. So the other thing, so earlier when we talked, we mentioned, hey, an array really is a key value pair, right? It's that key is in your mind. What I think of is, instead of it that way, is I think of it like this. Oop, I should put 3. So the keys are always incrementing up, and they're always, the next one. So that's also the difference between an associative array is you can't have gaps, right? It'll automatically, when something shifts from the middle, the other ones sink down. And now that, like, if we got rid of 3, 5, this one would automatically become 3. But
so it's always positional.
It is.
It's always positional.
Yeah. And moving around, and you pull something from the middle, and it everything shifts, right? Or from the beginning and whatnot. But still, in my head, once I started thinking of things this way, especially because then the key value pair in an array makes more sense, right? Because you see the two together, right? Now this, I don't think, actually, will this work? I don't think this will run. No, it won't. It won't take it like that because it's not proper. I need to turn it into, which we can do, right? We can turn it. Oops, we can use the curly braces, which apparently I can't hit. Why am? Oh, it's weird. Apparently, I can't just hit it. Now I can reload it, and now it works the same because we've turned it into an object or an associative array. And this actually could be out of order, right? This one we could put the 6 here and the 1 here. I think actually I don't. It'll yeah. So
Yes,
notice
it's still,
it orders it by the index, but this now is here, right? But this allows you to have control over what's what.
so yeah, so it's your message box that's doing that right now.
Right here, yes.
Okay, yeah.
Um,
Because you could, if I was to normally with that object that you just created or associative array,
Yeah.
the position isn't really a critical thing. It's more
not,
like
right.
it's more like the way I think about it is with the associative array, it's like the array itself, the object itself is it's an array of, it's a variable that holds variables.
So notice on that one.
So the array is the bigger outside variable, and then the keys are the variable that's inside of that array.
Say it again.
So to me, the way I think about an array is, or the object is, it's a variable that holds other variables within it. And those variables within it are those the keys. So the way I think about it is the key is a variable that's inside of that array or object.
I don't know if I would use the word variable on the inside. Sometimes they're a variable, but there's something inside it. Absolutely.
I just think of variable as something that's holding information.
Yeah, but that 6 is a 6. It doesn't vary.
No, that's not what I mean. So let's say if I create a variable called x.
Well, that's my point.
Not inside,
right.
not inside of not just x somewhere else. X colon equals this.
Yeah.
Then I create an array where I want to have multiple. Maybe the object has x, y, whatever, but I'm only really caring about that x. So each one, there is that variable x that I would have had to declare on its own before, but now it's part of a larger structure.
Yeah, and all I'm saying is it definitely can be a collection of variables, but it isn't always. Like in my case here, I don't have any variables inside here. In the example you just mentioned, you did.
No, it's not. It's the way I think about it. It's like it's a variable that contains, like, I don't think of the 6 colon 10, that the 6 is the way I think about it is a variable. Like there's a variable called 6, and this variable 6 is part of a larger structure.
That's
and
fine.
The value for that variable 6 is 10.
Okay.
I'm not explaining it well enough. Anyways.
Yeah. But all I'm saying is it's not a variable. But now I understand what you're saying. It's a reference, right? But anyway, right? It's your key that pulls up that value. But anyway, I get what you're saying now. It's because when you actually, so let's actually demonstrate, and let's not look at this one for the moment. Let's stick with arrays. We'll move over to social arrays here in a minute. So if I wanted to see like the third item in here, right, I can do this and simply do a message box and get the 30 because the .3, right, it's a dot notation, right, and this is the third item, that was the key, was 3, and that's why it pulled back the 30. Which, to your point, what you said a minute ago, on the other one, the 6 is going to pull back what it's associated to, the reference for the value for that, right? It's just the index. So yeah. But I think what gets confusing is that actually could be a variable, right?
Yes. You can use.
But it's.
So, for example, I use one of the things that I do frequently is display it in a graphical user interface, and I'll use something like the name or something like that, or get the handle to a window. So the name might be the handle to something, or.
And then, actually, let's get rid of the message box here, and then.
So what is this you're doing here?
Well, we're gonna remove hopefully the third index. And so when we go back and look at the array now, even though we load the array up here on line 7, it gets stored. We're going to remove, actually, let's do this twice. So we'll just, this way we'll look at it, we run it. Now look, there's, .1, .2, .3. These are all the indexes on the left and all the values. This next line is going to run on its own, and then we're going to see the next one, which hopefully, so notice now there's still a .3, right? Because as we mentioned earlier, everything's shifted. So there's no longer a .6, right? The .5, everything shifted.
This is something that I've dealt with a million times, and it can be frustrating. It can be frustrating working through sometimes thinking about how you work through it backwards.
Yeah. Or that's why you use an associative array instead,
mm-hmm.
right? And then you don't have to worry about that because then they don't shift, right? You can have gaps. They don't have to be sequential. And that's why I'm not a good enough programmer to know ahead of time of which way, like why I want to do it this way. But when you get into the pickle, like you just mentioned, you're like, what the hell? Why is it? Then you're like, oh, you know what? I just need to create an key valued pair or an associative array so it doesn't do that, right?
I think the biggest problem that I have is returning empty objects. Like I'll assume that I've created the object properly or the array properly or the associative array properly, but then when I go to do my testing and I'll have it pop up in a tooltip or a message box, it's empty.
Yeah.
So that comes down to, I guess, declaring it.
So
one of the things that you could do right now is under line 7, like if you drop down one line, you could add the 8th position.
Sure.
Right? You could say ARR.8 and then set it to equal a value. But you couldn't do that to begin with.
Well, I can't. Even then, it's not going to. Actually, I'm not sure. Let's see what it's going to do. Because it should add it. Huh.
Right? But if you were to just like, let's say you got rid of that line with where you're declaring your array and just tried doing the ARR.8, it's going to end up being blank.
That's funny. I thought those had to be sequential. When it's actually stored, I thought even if you assigned it, I thought it had to be. So what happens if we get rid of? Now let's remove.
Oh yes, I think I don't know if I talked to you about it before or if I did it during an array tutorial I had done a long time ago, where I can specify that I want to use index 0. Because most programming languages, it starts with index 0, whereas in AutoHotkey, many of the things start with index 1.
So see, then it just shifted 1. Yeah, that's interesting. Actually, let me use Maestros. Just easier to see it all at once.
Interesting.
Back to so the things shifted. Here, everything was golden down through and then the 80 is 8. Let's make this 9, and so there's a
How
bigger.
about 200?
Well, yeah, it still makes the point. So there's 9, and then let's remove here. So wow, that's fascinating. I would not have expected it to drop to 8. So it literally just subtracts 1, and it leaves it at its artificial interval. I thought these had to be sequential.
That's kind of weird because we were looking at remove. Was it remove at, and then you could do a range?
That's what I did here. Yeah, I did that a minute ago. We were chatting. So you can drop out whole areas. But it, again, that 80 is at, the fifth spot. It's not re-indexing anything, which surprised me. I thought they had to be sequential. So I learned something awesome.
I suspect it's just it doesn't have this as a contingency. Like it expects that if you're going to be doing these, that you're going to follow that the next item is the next item in the list. So when they have the code that's behind the scenes that does everything where it removes that thing from the list, it doesn't expect that you have this item that's a million times that's
Right.
at index 1,000,000. So it's just going to still remove only the amount of places that you removed.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I just thought maybe it was in Python. Maybe I'm confusing it, but I thought that they stayed sequential no matter what you numbered them. So anyway, lesson
Yeah,
learned.
it was one of the weird things that I seen right away because I, coming from a background in C, you would start with index 0 rather than index 1. So when I typed out something before, I actually used I equals 0 and then filled in that position. So I could actually fill the 0th position. But then when I went through and looked at the other ways, it was normally everything else was starting at 1.
Yeah.
So the ability that I could actually force it to start at 0 was kind of boggled my mind a little bit, confused me a little bit at the beginning.
I also I used delete here instead of remove, or remove at, and that works as well.
Delete.
Yeah.
So delete 3 is the remove the third value.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
I thought
But
delete was only on the.
No. Okay. It didn't shift. I was going to say if you do the delete, does that shift it properly? Probably not. But like when you add that ARR.9,
So it
and then
didn't
run it through the delete.
Yeah. So that's a really good point. It didn't notice here they shifted, and now with the remove, it shifts. The delete.
But you don't have the array, the ARR.9 anymore.
But it's still it's not going to.
See, the one that you have saved, the image that you have saved is from before when you still had ARR.9 = 80.
Yeah, but this is this. This is with a delete.
Okay.
They're not shifting.
Oh, they're not shifting. Oh, okay.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. It
That is so weird.
Well, it's good to know, right? It's like, well, now you know if you actually don't want them to shift, use delete instead of remove, and the things don't shift. So this is awesome.
Oh.
All right, let's so is there anything? I think those are the main ones with a regular array. And then now let's switch over. Let me just.
So okay, like I said, one of the things that I have the biggest problem with is the declaration. So it's my understanding, it's important to have that open and close brackets, that array : equals with open and close brackets as the first time you use that array. You don't have to declare all of its values there, but you do have to declare that open and close.
You have to create the array before you can use dot notation to add something to it. Yeah. Is that what you're saying?
Which is one of the when I first started was one of the biggest problems I would have, where it wasn't being declared at first, and I would try to add items to it. So I would jump right into trying to add to the 9th item or whatever, and I'd get returned blank.
Well, I'll tell you. Let me open a new window here, and actually you can even see this is my template for new files. Mm-hmm. See up here, I have this V object in an array. That's in part of my template, and I use that way to your point, right? Because I would forget to do it, and now I know I have this object already up above. Like that's the first thing I use is this V object. I'm like, oh, okay.
So you don't have to specifically put the values when you declare it there. Now you can add them with the dot notation.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is another thing Maestria taught me was make it global, because often later you're doing stuff in a function
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, why can't I, like he's like, just, you know what, he's like, I just set it global at the beginning, and yeah, later if you care you can change it, but he's like, it often you'll forget that like it's inside a function and you got to pass it to it, in order to do stuff, and this way you don't have to worry about it. But yeah, so that's my default. Where Here we are. Okay, so here we're creating I was going to say an associative array, right? And like you said, we can start it there, then we can add to it, or let's add Joe.
So we talked about this off camera, but what is with the quotes around the key?
Yeah, that's a good point. They're not required. I built a little cheat sheet, right, which Maestrith helped us with. Let's bring it up to there. They're not needed if you use, A to Z in upper or lowercase, or numbers, or an underscore. So actually, I could have done this just fine like this, right? That would have been, and let's. So there's my, because it's the key, it has the dot in front of it, but there's the Joe lines.
Mm-hmm.
If this had a space in here, this shouldn't even. Yeah, it doesn't. I'm surprised it actually loaded, but it didn't work because now it has a space in there. But I can wrap this with quotes, and now it's fine.
Okay, so that's what the quotes are.
Yeah.
So if you want to have space in there.
Or, of course, I could have just put in an underscore, right? And that would be fine.
Mm-hmm. Which is what I would usually do.
Yeah,
But I don't. But that's because I also didn't know about the quotes until today. What the
well,
quotes were doing.
yeah, for me, it also depends. When you're stuffing things in here from an external source, you don't know what in the world it might be, right?
That's where I was thinking it would be very useful.
Yeah, that's right. Sometimes you do, but sometimes you don't, and then you want to cover your butt. But
Because I hate typing quotes, so the less I have to type quotes, the better.
yeah, that's why in Studio, when you hit one, it does the other, and normally, and it took me a while to get used to, so I kept trying to hit the second quote, but now I don't have to once I got used to it. So there's the first one, the key value pair. Then we're going to put in a comma, and we'll say HellBent and Civ. I'm glad it's on the page. I can never reborn. Oop. Reborn. There we go. And now when we look at it,
It's going to be blank.
what'd I mess up?
It's no quotes around CiveReborn.
Oh, I forgot the
literal
values.
text.
Well,
Because other words, you would have to. It's thinking that that's a variable.
Yeah, the values need quotes. So now we have both. And if we wanted to access get your channel, right, we can put in the key. I don't think, though, we can't do the other way. We can't put, I think Python you can. We can't put in here CiveReborn, and it won't pull out anything, right? You have to loop over everything until you find that as the value, and then, grab it. Does that make sense?
Yes. So if you know that somewhere in your array or associative array you might have that value,
Yeah.
you'll loop over it and compare every one of the values to see if
Right.
it matches that.
Right. And then say, okay, now here's the index it was, that's a reference to it. I think, like I said,
How
Python,
would you get the name? I'm pretty sure you can do this. How would it, let's say I did want to do that and I did find it, how would I then get the name of the key that it's associated with?
so.
Oh yes, it's that key value.
Yeah.
Or the K value.
If V Maybe I should wrap this just to be sure. So I'm in there. If the V equals that, I thought that would have worked. Let me add a return here so we don't get past it and get confused. Oh, there we go. Maybe I needed those to enclose the if statement to make sure it knew to look to that. But that's
why I typically don't use the other way, where I just go with everything's as an expression, everything in brackets. Because there is sometimes that confusion where you have to, some things in the expression you need the literal stuff to be quoted, and in the other way you need to have percent marks. So I just stick with the one. I'm okay.
Yeah.
Likewise with declaring a variable, it's always colon equals. Rarely ever, unless it absolutely has to be, it won't be equals without the colon.
No, well that is just saying, treat the follower as an expression. But that's a sneaky way. I was talking to Maester the other day. When I have quotes in the thing I want to have in my variable, then I do that way. Like if I was trying to store a variable called the, or I'll do var.
I get what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah.
So now when I show this, it's a super easy way to have double quotes in your variable. But you're right, it's not a good way, it's not good form, but it works.
But that is no. This is one of those examples where I would totally do that. Another one is I haven't used it too much. It's that string join or join trim, or I don't know what it's called. Concat. No.
Well, the stir split I use a lot. I don't know if that's what you're.
It's where you start with. Okay, so if var equals, and then you drop down a line and you have an open parentheses with like our new return and blah 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 join and this. I rarely use it.
Oh, the join. Yeah.
No, I rarely use it, but that's another example where I have to use the equals. I assume. I don't know.
The join is really nice because even with percents and other, you can turn it off and have like virtually everything that's within this, unless it's the very last one.
I created a tool a little while ago for all the functions within a library, and I wanted to be able to copy that function and be able to paste it into my script. And in order to do that, I had to do this.
Yeah.
Because the function has percent marks and quotes and.
The only thing I've run into is some of the stuff, ironically, that I was trying to work on ended like this. The last line was a closed paren. And that one, if I remember correctly, I had to do this because it thought that was the end of the variable.
So you still sometimes have to escape things.
Yeah. It was a bummer. Because otherwise, everything I put in there, it was SQL I was doing. And I could literally put everything in there and it didn't care, except for that when it's on its own line, it was like, we think that's the end of, we think it's this line, right? And I'm like, I get it.
I didn't even think of that. Good thing that it worked out for me.
Yeah.
Well, I think in my case I was copying code, so rarely code would end like that.
Yeah. That join command also is really cool because if you want each of your lines to like end in a certain value, you can have it add a comma or add whatever at the end of it by using this.
I remember there's a name for that thing. What is the name of doing that?
Well, I'd say concatenate.
Like how you wrote it like that.
I don't know.
Okay. Well, there was a name. I don't remember what it is.
Well, there's the long. When you look in the help, it's for dealing with long. They make a reference to long variables. I'm just going to do this just so I can pull this help up.
I believe it started with a C, the term for it, but I don't remember what it was.
So is it concatenate? Is that what you're thinking of?
It's something like that, but I'm not sure because concatenate is something.
You're combining.
Something else.
Concatenate.
Yeah, that's. I could be way off. It could be Z. It starts with Z.
Continuous sections. Is that?
Yes. Join continuous sections. Yes.
Yeah. I've used it. It's pretty helpful to deal with big stuff. And like I said, if you wanted everything to have a space at the end or a semicolon or a comma or whatever, it can allow you to automate some of that crap where you don't have to deal with putting it in a program, right? It'll automatically put it there for you. Anyway, let's stick back with what we were trying to cover. It's all good stuff, but
yeah.
So that's for setting up. Now, to the point, we could have put the quotes in around the keys as well, right? And then for a key value pair, like let's go ahead and get rid of this. We could add.
So okay, so that for loop, if we can go back to that, if you can paste that back in. When I first started with AutoHotkey, for loops were a different thing. So can you explain what this for line means?
Yeah, actually, the other thing I was going to demonstrate it on up above, but we can do it here too. And we'll just stick with straight up AutoHotkey code to keep it simple. Key. So we're this for is assuming there's you basically have, I think, either object or an array that you're going to loop over, right? So here, the key and the value can be any letters you want. Of course, you don't want to use ones from something from before, because I see Maestro doing code, and he'll do for A and B, a comma B, and in this, and then do another one beneath it. And if you reuse them, things can get haywire, right? So be conscious of that. But this is where we're pushing back to this object we created, this associative array, right? And then we're going to get the key and the value and display it each time it loops over it. And if we wanted more, as we did in the one up above, we can wrap it here, and I could put several things here if we wanted to have it.
So one of the things that I've heard it described as is you can call it a for each item.
Yeah. For
each item.
Yep. That was, I remember in VBA, I think that's what they referenced to it. The important part is, remember, it's the key. The key is the index, right? The thing on the left, and then the value is the thing on the right. The key is the reference of what it is. The value is what it's actually holding, right? What you're going to pull back. What I was going to say was, let's say all you wanted to do, you had a list of things you wanted to loop over, right? It's even easier to see with an array. Let's do this one. And here we're going to do, so in this one, it's going to go over each one of those, right? Well, if all you wanted to do was to loop over these items, right, there's no reason to actually create this array. We can copy this. I'm going to comment it out. I can shove it right here, right? I never have to store it in memory. AutoHotkey will automatically treat it the same way and will loop over that array without, it's basically creating like a virtual array. It never actually saves it in memory, and I guess it probably does, right? I'm sure it does. But the second it's done out of that loop, it's gone, and it never, you don't have to worry that it's still there. It's one where I used to go and create it and save it, and then do something. You're like, you know what? It's just temporary, right? I just want to reference it. I don't have to go do all this crazy stuff.
I think one of the advantages of just using the name of the array is that you can keep that declaration up at the top of your script or somewhere out of the way, and then the things that are actually doing the things that you want them to do is minimalistic, so you can actually read it a little bit easier. It's not very cluttered.
I think it depends. It's a really good point. If you have a lot of stuff in here, right, or it's really long words or something, then that would be troublesome. But again, if they're not going to change, I don't know if I would, save it somewhere and then have to worry that it's taking up a little more memory, and that also I might reuse that variable when I thought it was available, right? Again, I think it's something that's nice to know. It's a possibility, but you're right, because there's a lot of other things. Rarely for me do I have a list of hard-coded things that I'm going to do something with. Right, it's usually you create it, but then you're adding to it or deleting from it or whatever, right? And that's
I'm on the opposite. Like sometimes I do add things, but I do often have lists of things. Like, for example, I might want to create something with colors.
Uh-huh.
So I might want to have a list of different colors, and those are all hard coded, and I can just select the index perhaps randomly.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, there's the objects and creating multiple instances of objects, but that's a different thing. So okay, so let's say you have that associative array. What if I wanted to create multiple of those? So one of the things that I do a lot, and one of the things that people ask me a lot about are like coordinates. So they want to create an array of. So for example, somebody's asked me recently. They don't really know. They what I've told them to do is to create an array, which is that first thing that you have there, that is filled with those associative arrays. So a good example of that could be if I want to store X and Y positions, and I want to have an array of those. So if I want to have multiple X and Y positions,
Actually, but are you sure you want it as a?
No. You want to do lock as an array. You just want to declare it as an array.
Yeah, that's well, I thought you said.
And then set each of the indexes to be one of those objects.
I don't know why in Studio I can't. I thought you said you
No,
create them as an object.
that wouldn't work. I don't think that would work.
What won't?
It's the way your syntax.
Well, the other way would have. So how are?
Okay, show me your.
Well, as
No. But what if I want lock 1 to be array? Like what? Okay, so let's say I have 100 positions that I want to record.
Okay,
So
there's your array.
100 positions that have an X value and a Y value. So then I need an array of those objects or associative arrays.
I don't work with this kind of stuff, so I can't think that way.
You have a phone book. Each person has a name, so that's one of their key value pairs is a name, and the other one is their phone number. But there's 100 people.
Then
how would you write that?
I wouldn't use an array. I would use an associative arrays for both.
Can you show me how you would do that?
Well, that's how I had it. Was oh my God. Right? I mean, that's right.
Yeah, that's one.
Yeah. But then you wouldn't, you could have each one of those would be, so this would really be X1 and Y1, I guess, and then you could just keep adding to it.
That's how you would do that?
I don't know what you're trying to do with it.
Okay. Okay, so let's say you wanted to create a phone book, right? So you have
that would
you have
give
100 people. You have 100 people.
Yeah, but that would give you 100 people. Right.
Each person has a name and a phone number. How would you write that out? How would you create that array, that associative array, that array of associative arrays?
In quotes just to. Right, that would still.
But now, what if you wanted 100 of those?
You keep
so
adding
that still would have, or okay, I understand what you're saying. I know. Okay. Yeah, I would do that very. I think.
Well, that's one way. It just depends how you're planning to use it later. Would change how I write this, right? That's why I'm saying it's like it just depends how you're going to end up using it. how you're going to consume it would definitely change if you want to have multiple levels and be
Well,
able to
okay,
reference.
I'll tell you. Maybe I should have just started off with this. What I'm trying to do is transition into array of arrays, an array and an array of arrays. Or multi-dimensional arrays, but more with the second one, the thing that populates the array is the associative arrays.
Yeah, so you first just declare the first one, and then you can shove things under it. Right, this is my example of what you're talking about. So I first create the outer object one, and then I'm looping over my variable here with the line breaks, and so that's what this part's doing. This is looping over it's using stir split to loop over this line by line, and then it parses each one because these are tabs in between them, right? Mm-hmm. And it sets up first. You got to create the first object so you can nest things under it. And then here's I set for the first name. I put in the first name, the last name, and then the phone number. Does that make sense?
So are you doing this all in one associative array?
It's a nested. They're nested under this.
Okay. So it is multidimensional.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't. Your syntax is. I don't. Object string split. Row,
well, this is the. It's down. Putting the. Where is it? Here, the first name, last name.
String split row.
Oh, this is the. Yeah, that's the first tab value. So actually, let's look at it. Let's use, instead of doing this, let's just use matrix function. Where that's in here. I declared the object there, so why? Because I use this demo when I'm trying to nest an array. Mm-hmm. That this is my go-to of like, I just pull it up and then I just use it because it's easier for me to think through. Oh, it's using the email address. That's what it is as the key on that first one. I'm just curious, why is it? Okay, it is getting in there. But they're not. Let me see if this was oh, didn't like that. I thought that would. Oh, I need my brackets. Sorry. Oh, I would have thought that would have worked. Yeah, I've used this so many times. I don't know. Let's not worry about this example then, because clearly something's wrong. And it's, I got all this with the formatting to fix the name case of the first names and stuff. So it just adds confusion to it. Yeah. But yeah, it I'd rather not get into to nest it, I mean, that's getting pretty advanced, I think, for the first video. And again, I don't really use them, so I don't have a good.
Well, your example there is for nesting it in a for loop, right?
Well, I'm using a for loop to nest an object. Yes. I was using the email address as the key, and then I could reference the key and pull back the first name, last name, whatever, right, across it.
So there's a couple of ways that I've done, or I've seen how you can do multi-dimensional. One is with the name of the array, followed by open and close as well. So you have 2 layers or 3 layers of open and close with the index. The other one is if I want to, I could also do a comma in it.
Yeah, no, I've worked through the help file, which I think that's exactly what you just described, right? But again, I never have the need for that.
Do you know if there's any difference between the two of them?
They do. You end up with slightly different, depending how you build it, right? It's slightly different. But it just depends of what your need is and how you're going to want your data structured, I think, is how you got to decide which way you want it.
For me, I often use it for creating grids.
Yeah, and I don't do anything with a grid. It's so weird. I don't know. I think it's somewhere in here they get into the. Here we go. This is what you're talking about, right?
Yes, the 2 different ways.
Yeah, I worked through this a couple times, and I'm like, okay, I see it, but I just don't use data that way. So
I know, because I don't work with objects the same or the associative arrays as much as you. If I was to tackle that name and phone number thing, I would actually create an array. So the array just holds the index, and then each one of those indexes equals an object that has the name and the phone number.
That's fine. You can do that too. But you can loop over the other one, right? I mean, I guess it just depends. If you want both the key and the value, then you should nest them. That's what I was doing with the email address, and that's why, so I can get the name, first name, last name, and I forget the phone number maybe. But and then yeah, that way you can. But either way, you can still figure out how to loop over and get every value, right? It's just depending, again, I think, how you're going to use the data.
So, okay, can we go over what are some of the things that we can do with an array? Like operations we can do on the array itself. Like we looked at delete and remove, but is there some other things that we can do with an array?
There are. I mean, I almost never do, other than the pop, which drops one from.
I'll tell you. I don't do it often, but I have done tutorials where everything is directly off of the documentation page. So
Yeah.
Who cares? So a lot of people they have a hard time reading the documentation page.
Yeah, let's save that for our next one.
Okay.
I mean, we can just talk to it real quickly, but I don't want to work through each one because it's really, pop. Just talk for like 10 seconds, okay?
Okay. So one of the operations that we can do on an array is this. I'm talking about the numerical one where we're looking at the position within the array. So the first position, second position, third position. One of the things we can do is if we wanted to add a new item to it and we wanted that item to go to the very end of the array, What we could do is use this dot push. So we could say the name of the array, and then dot and push, and then inside of parentheses we can put the new value that we want. So this is our normal numerical array, or just normal array. And when we push onto it, it's going to check what the length of the array currently is, and it's going to add one index to it and put that new value at that end. And we can do this operation over and over and over again. The other one that we can do is we can pop items, which is to remove the last item from our array. So there's, I forget how the saying goes, but it's like last on, first off.
Mm-hmm.
So the last item that gets added is the first item that gets removed when we pop. And this comes back to that, the array shifting its position when you remove something. So you want to make sure you remove it from the end of the array, so that way the numbers don't get messed up. Because if you remove something from the first position and then you go to do something on the second position, the second position is actually now what used to be the third position. So this push and pop operations that we can do avoids that. So when you remove something off, there's nothing to collapse back, and you still stay on.
It doesn't. Yeah, I mean, it.
I wasn't. I was speaking to the viewer.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just saying it doesn't remove the issue entirely. It just helps avoid some of the issues, right? Because sometimes you need to remove something from the beginning, right? I'm just saying it doesn't always take care of all the problems.
Yes, but in those cases, one of the things you could probably do is you could so if I need to remove something, I wouldn't maybe do it inside of a loop, or if I was doing it in the loop, I would restart and start the loop over again. So I'd have one loop to remove that item, and then I would get out of that loop because all my numbers, all my positioning is all messed up now, and then start a new loop where my positioning will be back to being good, where I'm looking at the first index, which is the first item, the second index, which is the second item, rather than having the second item being actually the third item from before.
Well, or you just start from the back and work your way forward, and then you don't have to worry about it.
Which is the pop.
No, the pop.
But like you said, sometimes you have no choice. You have to. Sorry, go ahead.
The pop is dropping from the last one, right?
Yes, the last item added.
Yeah. All I'm saying is I could go through and I could remove the fifth, the third, and the second, right? Mm-hmm. As long as I go in that order, everything is fine.
Yes, right? Yeah. Okay, I understand. Now I understand what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah.
As long as you're working backwards, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because in other words, things shift into position, and what should be, yeah.
Yeah. It was, I mentioned that with my truth. When I was doing stuff in Excel, I'd have columns of data, and I'm like, oh, I want to get rid of this column, column B, and then column D, and that's what you're saying. It's the same thing, right? You get rid of column B, everything to the right shifted over, now I have a new column B, and, and I'm totally...
And what you're actually removing is E, column E.
Yeah, so we'll see, I think, right? But anyway.
Oh, I thought you said D, whatever. C, B, D, E, they all sound alike, whatever.
But that was when I realized I need to figure out a way to invert my list and start from the right, and then it's fine. I don't have to keep looping, starting and stopping the loop. I just got to start on the right and remove the things going to the left, and it works.
Now, is there a built-in variable that does the reverse? Like I know there's the A index counts the no, okay, no, not necessary.
No,
I answered my own
backwards.
question. I answered my own question. It's irrelevant. You don't need a variable for that. You use your own variables, whatever.
Yeah, but it's still, how do you get the eighth item? I mean, again, as long as you know which ones you want, you just use the delete, right? Mm-hmm. Actually, the delete we found from our testing in this things don't shift, right? It's the remove that will make things shift. Mm-hmm. So you could delete the first and the second, and everything still stays where it is, apparently. So you wouldn't, if you don't want, but again, it depends what your goal is, and if you're going to have millions of things, you want to keep trimming down that list of things. Otherwise, I'm sure it must take up some memory to keep a placeholder there, right? Type of thing.
That brings up a point. How do I get rid of an object or an array once I'm done with it?
Um,
Free up the memory.
I just do that, and that works. I've asked Maester if I remember right. He said I think there's another way to do it, but that works okay.
Yeah.
And it's easy to remember. So
basically, that's just creating. It's almost like our array is now just a variable with no value in it.
well, it's nothing. Yeah. Yeah. And if you look at it, so it does. You're right. It does show up, right? Theoretically, what you were really wanting is,
What I think is we've overridden the array and created a variable using that same name.
yeah. I think there is a way to kill it entirely, though. But
with modern computers, the amount of memory that variable takes up is
nothing.
Like, it's not even insignificant. It's less than insignificant.
Yeah.
Like maybe weback in the day when it cost like $1,000 for a kilobyte of memory.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now it's like we're getting close to the point where it's a terabyte a dollar per terabyte.
Yeah, I need to actually upgrade my system here at some point. I got 32 gigs of RAM, and I'm like, I don't know if I really, ever need more. I mean, things haven't really gotten bigger. Not like they used to be doing.
Oh, you mean the increment change?
Yeah, well, just, things used to get really, really blown up in size, and it doesn't seem like things are quite as bad as they used to be. Were there any other methods that you wanted to?
What about if I wanted to add something to an array and to a associative array?
Actually, so sorry. I just saw this here. This says it does releases the last reference and therefore frees the object. And that's how they're doing it in AutoHotkey help.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I part of I don't have much to do here. My job is to ask you questions that people might ask.
Yeah, but so what did you just say?
What if I want to add something, insert something into my array, my normal array, my indexed array, and my associative array? So I guess with the associative array, I don't actually need to insert. I can just create a new key and value for it.
Well, in the normal array, which that's what I did here, right? I don't know if you were watching when you were talking through all these things, I was doing them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I thought you
saw.
So
this one adds it to the end though. But what if I need it to actually, for whatever reason I might have, I need to actually put it at the 5th position, or
that's why I would
shift things around and.
Yeah, I wouldn't be using an array in that personally. I mean, of course, there still obviously can be the case where you'd want to do that. Yeah, I don't remember. Is there an insert?
I think there's an insert, but I'm not sure.
Insert at. Let's just try it. Insert at position. Okay, so position is, let's do 3, and value is 300.
Okay, so what I see there, what it looks like there is I can add multiple items starting at that position.
Yeah.
So each time, so add 400 next, and 400 would be the no. Just do the 400.
Well, it's still. Do you just want me to go back and do just the 400?
Yeah, because it's well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't. It's. I was just trying to keep the 3-digit number. 3-digit number is, we don't have that in our array at all. We have one digit number for its index, 2 digits number for its value. So adding 3-digit values makes it clear that those are the new things we just added for someone who looks at the screen. But it doesn't matter because there is no other one decimal values besides that 4. So all the other ones that originally were there are 2 decimal places. So when you added that, it shuffled everything
Oh, I
down
see.
3 places.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you started it.
So you can pick the start point, but you can't put in pairs. You can insert a bunch in consecutively.
Hmm. But if you wanted to, you could do that insert operation again if you needed
Absolutely.
to
Sure.
insert at the 16th
Right.
position later.
But you'd have to make sure you realize now if you just did it, now your array is actually different.
Yeah, which comes back to that whole thing about the push and pop
Yeah.
and working
Well,
backwards through it.
but yeah. It's just still it's the fact that things shift, and you have to make sure you account for it. Right.
Now, this is something that we don't have to worry about with the associative array, though, because we can. It doesn't really matter where it's.
That's right. The key is unique, and actually, it's a great way. Is one of the things I learned. We talked earlier, and I was telling you, I've learned so much watching Maestriath code and do stuff. And one was like, actually, it might have been why I had that loop for the email address and stuffing it in there, was I needed a quick way to dedupe email addresses, and people. And he's like, oh, just shove it into an object and use it as a key. And I'm like, it's so simple, right? There's no deduping. It's just the key is unique, so it just shoves it in, and if it's already there, it'll overwrite the value, but it dedupes it because you can't have the same key twice. And I'm like, holy cow, that's so
what
simple.
happens if you have the same key twice? Does it override the previous one, or does it
It'll
error?
No, it doesn't error at all. It thinks you're trying to set a new value.
Okay.
Right, and
Yeah.
so it'll assign the new value. Of course, you could build in some logic to first detect if that key exists, and then decide what to do. Right, but
there's something we can end on. How do you? I know you used to have a couple of ways that you could look at objects. You had a couple of functions that you could look at what the values are of objects.
Yeah, and I still have them at the tips of my fingers. So, well, obviously this one, right, which we've been demonstrating, is Maestriath's function, which does it. But this object to string, and let's do that one first. It's going to dump it in this out. So this is in AutoHotkey Studio, right? It's going to dump it down to here. So this object to string, it looks familiar, right? Because that's actually Maestriath's function also, which is built into his message box. Or every once in a while, I want to use a little slightly different look at things. And I can use this Explorer object. And this will, oh, you know what? I got rid of the other one I had. There was one that put it into a JSON function format. So it was, I wish I could remember. It's probably pretty darn close to this. I just replaced the hot string the other day. Object to string, maybe? No. Let's see if it'll offer it. So see that format? So it puts them in laid out this way, and depending on what I'm looking at, right? Sometimes if I have a lot of data, I will put it in this format instead of the other way.
I remember seeing. I don't think I've ever had to use it, but there's one of the other methods that you can call on the object or array is has key. .has key or something like that along those lines. I don't know what it is or what it does. Are you aware of it?
I think you can check to see if it's a key in the object. I just want to demonstrate real quickly. This is the other one I'll use. The problem with this one is if the text is too long, it'll error out on some of the variables, the values. But what's cool is this actually gives you, if you wanted to access this, it would give you the actual syntax, as does Maestriath, but you have to add the name of the reference in front of it. But so that's another way you can look at it.
Yeah, I think you gave me a copy of that function before.
Yeah, and I still at times
when I first started with objects.
We'll use it. But let's go back to our example. Make sure I'm getting okay. Everything's blocked out down to here. So first, let's make sure this comes up. So that's there. So let's try to see as key. I got to think we would put Joe, and theoretically this might come back as a 1. So it's a 1 because that there is a key named Joe. And so actually earlier when we were talking about using email address and deduping it and it will automatically override it, that would be a way to first, before you do that, to detect if there's already one there, and then you can make a decision. Do you want to say don't overwrite it, or go ahead, actually if you don't care, you would just take the new one, right? But if we put in JOH, since there's no JOH there, it comes back as a 0.
And what about if one of the problems that I've often had is just because I declared my objects wrong or whatever, is how do I detect if an object actually exists?
Sure, that's a key one. Is object. These are why I have hot strings to pull them up, because like you said, that's the very first thing I do is make sure the thing I'm looking at is an object. If this thing was declared, actually let's now when I rerun this, it comes back as a 0, right? Because var is not an object; it's a variable. But I'm really glad you mentioned that, because for beginners, that's one of the first things you need to know, right?
It is a nightmare. It is a nightmare.
It is absolutely. I wasted so much time, and even then, like Maestrid's still at times too, and he's amazing, right? But he's like, "What in the hell?" And he's like, "Crap, it's not an object. It's just one of those things."
I think a lot of the times, like for myself, one of the problems is not making it global and then passing it to functions.
Sure. Yeah. The scope. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, objects you can pass. I believe you can pass objects.
Absolutely.
To a function.
Well,
without using. So you can. Okay. So 1, can you pass an object to a function?
Yeah.
2, can you pass just the key, like use the key of a specific object?
Sure. Yeah. As a parameter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, you're passing it to it. So we're talking about the parameters of the function. So yes. What I was going to say, my favorite use is when I have a lot of data inside of a function I want to pull out, is I stuff it in an object and I return the object. Right. And that way everything comes out and I can use my name dot notation to pull out exactly what I want from it. Right. And it's
you do bring up a good point. There's actually a couple of built-in functions with AutoHotkey. I don't remember. I think it's like string length is one for string split for example.
Yeah, I use that
where it automatically, you don't have to declare it the way you normally would. So
whoa, hey. What in the world? That is so weird. All right, so fine, I won't. I don't know what's going on. Message box, stir, split, and we're going to put it in var. Oops, var. We're going to parse on a space, right? And now that would return an object. I'd have to save it over here, right? I would say.
Yeah, so you say it equals
this, but instead of doing that, let me get rid of it just so people don't get confused. I can just say, give me the second or the third one, right? Because I can't type properly. That'll give me cow, right? Because
interesting.
To the left, this is the first, second, and third, right? Or I can say, give me the second, right? Or I can reference it multiple times.
Okay, now let's say I often I wouldn't do this inside of a message box. Let's say that I was to declare, I was to say that var1 or var2 or whatever is equal to that returned value. Would that, because so normally if I say, let's say I have a new variable, it's called var2. Okay. If I said that var2 equals the return value from string split without the .2 notation at the end, that would I wouldn't have to declare an object the way I would normally would, because it's being declared within that function, and that return value it's like making a copy of itself. So there is somewhere object is being declared, but it's inside of a function that we can't see.
Well, it's again, it is declared, but the way I was doing it, it never gets saved. It gets used and it disappears the second it's past it.
So okay, so here now if you were to split that var, now you could use a message box and pop up what is the second position or whatever.
Yeah, the second one. Yeah.
Okay, so we know now that var is an object. What
Right.
if you were to just do that .2 at the end of the string split? Does it still make var2? Is var2 still an object?
Sure, it will
I
be.
assume it would be. I assume it would be, right? Oh.
Actually, let's.
No, it's
Well, it's splitting it first, so yeah. I don't think it is. Yeah, but even then, why would you want to? Right? Because you're telling, this is now it's saying access that point. No, you could store. See,
it's just going to be a normal variable. It's not actually going to be in.
Right. It's going to be that value. It's going to be that value of what that was, not the object.
Okay.
Because the second you add the dot notation, it no longer is saying store this as the default. It's saying only access this not element or whatever you want to call it, but the indexed, the first item in that index.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I love that because then I don't have to save it. I don't have to remember to delete my variables and whatnot. Right, I can just reference it straight up like that.
Yeah, but you were saying about if I have a function that I want to return multiple values, but I don't want to make all the variables global, I can return it in an object.
Yeah. So let's say we had a function. And in it, we had an odd. Well, no. Well, I got to create the.
Just create any kind of key value pair.
Yeah. Oops. So now I have an object, and actually, since this is in here, I can just hit return here.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, I don't even have to have it down there. And now, what I'll do is I'm going to put a message box here and say my func. And oh, actually, I don't. On my func, I'm sorry. Let's do this the right way. So I'm going to say duh is my func. And now if I do a message box duh .k, if I did this right.
Now, don't you need the open and close parentheses for the my func?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
There we go. Thank you. Yeah. I just set it as a blank variable without the and then I can do duh .2 to get yours, to get both.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that way I'm returning both of these or as many as you want, right? And that's what I love about it. And I think I don't know if we talked about this, but you can get the length too, right?
Do you know the difference between max index and length?
I looked it up once. I think for the most part, two. Sorry. It's to me they were the same. There was some weird arbitrary something, but I don't know. No, I don't. I mean,
okay.
I don't
either.
Yeah.
At one point, I had used max index, but then I just started using length.
Yeah. I think there was some.
Remember how we removed a bunch of the indices and it didn't collapse back? What would have the length given us? Because that could be the kind of place where the max index and the length differ, because one with the max index, it might give us that further one that's pushed up ahead, that 9th position, 10th position, or whatever, and the length would actually just count up however many indices we have, or how many values we have. That's not. It's actually, for what I'm talking about, it's the .8. You would actually use .8 equals a value.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't remember. So, is it not
Max index.
Index? Thank you.
And the length also needs the open and close parentheses. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. I think it does.
No, it pulled back both. Why did it pull back 8? Why the hell is that pulling back 8? Oh, because I set this to 8. So interesting.
Yeah, but that's what I wanted to know. See, because there's actually only 6 items. There's actually only 6 items.
But they're both returning back. So, okay, so I was right. It has blanks in there at the other indexes.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So we can't see them, but they're there.
Right. Yeah, they are still there. That's why that makes sense. Okay.
But why? Okay. I guess it's probably to do with something with the function that Maestricht wrote, but because we don't see that the position 6 is blank, position 7 is blank, position 8 is blank. We just see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 8.
Yeah.
I think this is stuff to be aware of. Like, this is
Absolutely.
Really,
yep.
Because I wouldn't have known this, and I probably, if I had something that was messing around with the indices and removing them at certain places, this would really mess me up.
Well, especially that, I think it's a great point of, you stuff something in later and then you do the length and you're like, well, wait a minute, there's, you do a for loop over it and there's 7 things, and yet you get the length and it says 100.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
What is your prediction? What do you think it's going to say? I think it's going to say 100. I think it's going to say 100.
I was going to count. I was going to try and get the length. I was going to make sure that it doesn't, which I know it doesn't because it's the keys, so they're not there.
Oh, okay.
Though they are there. Yeah, see, it just in this done. Because I don't think the max and the length aren't going to change inside this as opposed to outside it, right? I just wanted to make sure it didn't where there's that big hole, right? It didn't still plug along and say that key's empty, that key's empty, right?
I'm actually kind of surprised that it didn't.
I'm somewhat too. I agree. It's not intuitive.
It could be Maestricht's message function.
No, I'm not using
parsing things out.
Well, it's fine. I'll get rid of it. It's
I'm just saying it could be. I don't know that it is.
I don't think it is because we're iterating over each one separately, and it wouldn't skip. We would see a blank message box, not. It wouldn't miss it entirely because it's still the message box, right? And the fact that the key wasn't there. Yeah. Yeah, good to know. They're sort of there. So indexing the max index, I can understand how that would be 100. because it's looking at that as a value, not a value. I shouldn't use, it's a bad word to use there, but it's looking at that as like, what is that biggest number? But the
Yeah,
link,
yeah.
I would have thought would have counted how many
That it would
items.
have actually gone over every single
Yes.
item and counted it.
Yeah.
Tick,
Right.
tick, tick,
Right.
tick.
Right. So yeah.
So I don't know. I really don't understand how it's getting a value of 100, but it's not going to show us what those. It's not going to show us those blank values, those blank key values. It's not going to just pop up a message box that's blank.
Yeah.
That makes less sense to me.
Yeah. Well,
Like I can understand. I can understand. Okay, fine. You want to use the max index as the amount of things that are in it. Okay, fine. That's okay.
Right.
But show me those blank things that you're saying exist.
Right.
Because I've put up 100 message boxes that are blank when I'm expecting a value.
Yeah. Far out, man.
Yeah. It could be just behind the scenes. When they wrote out AutoHotkey, they said, you know what? Why would we show this? This is pointless information. So let's just parse this out. So it exists, but we're not going to bother showing it because whatever. I don't know. I'm talking out of my ass here. But yeah, that is weird. That is weird.
Well, and they're doing it on an array, but in the length 1 to the end of the array. Yeah. I don't understand what this means. Looping through an array's content can be done either with the loop, or index. I guess they're meaning loop. You need the loop, and then do the A index to get the item, not the It's just the way it makes it sound like you can somehow reference index and then it's going to loop, but you would need it with the either a loop command or the for loop. Oh, and they are here. Okay, I get it now. So what in the world would this do?
It's going to. Oh, you mean within our situation?
Yeah.
I think it's going to be the same. Ooh.
It's going to have a bunch of blank spots.
Yeah, we should have those blank spots.
Yep.
Yes, we do.
Far out. Hey, I gotta get going here pretty soon. But, this has been, I think, a good I think covering for people and a good lesson for each of us for some of the little nitty gritty things.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's been great talking with you, Joe.
Sure, man.
We'll do it again soon. I'll make sure that I post a little video saying to go over to your channel and
vice versa.
Check out this video.
All right, I'm gonna stop recording here. Hold on just 1 second.